This is a wine called Rioja from Spain, which and most of what's made there is actually red. Okay, it's made from Tempranillo along with Garnacha and Mazuelo and a few other varieties, but mainly based on Tempranillo generally. And it's generally made in a very kind of rich and oxidative manner, kind of like I talked about earlier. So long time in barrel, excuse me, and it develops all these savory flavors like tobacco and leather and tar and mushroom and things like that, right? But this is taking a white variety and applying the same principles. So this is a variety called Vieira with a little bit of Macabeo, and it's from a legendary winery that's been around for well over a century called Lopez de Heredia. And it's a single vineyard called Viña Tendonia, which is their most highly regarded vineyard. And it spends a long time in basically neutral oak barrels, okay? So it's not getting a lot of those rich new oak flavors like vanilla and baking spice. It's more about the very slow exposure to oxygen, developing these kind of nutty type things. And it does spend some time on lees as well. So some of the same principles that we tasted in the champagne, but it's kind of almost like really aged still champagne in a lot of ways. Okay. So it's got a lot of nuttiness. It's got a lot of those savory things that we talked about before. Those more kind of bruised things that also.
We're talking about a white varietal that you can eat with a fatty piece of meat.
100%.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's what
I want to do in the summer.
Really popping, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You want, again, you don't want to be drinking Cabernet when it's 85 degrees out. I don't, anyways. Maybe some people can do it, but for me, it's just my palate just gets shot so fast, right? Because you've got wine that's, red wines are generally served at warmer temperatures than whites. And that's something to keep an eye on too for those of you listening that have an interest in wine and let's say only red wine, is to really drink your wines at roughly the right temperature. And when I say roughly, I mean for reds, you generally want them around 60 to 65 degrees, no warmer than that, because all you get is alcohol when they're too warm and they just become overpowering on your palate.
Sure. What's the ABV on this one?
This one is 12.5%. Yeah.
I can taste it.
Yeah, meaning that you think it's high or low?
A little bit high for what you would expect.
Okay.
From a white wine.
Yeah, it's actually on the lower side technically, although I think what you're getting here is there is this what we describe as almost like aldehydic. So basically when wines go through a long aging process and they're exposed to more oxygen, the ethyl alcohol in this, or ethanol, which is the main kind of what we call drinking alcohol, right? That's the main alcohol produced for fermentation for all the beverages that we love. It will start to oxidize that alcohol, and there's something that's created called acetaldehyde. Okay, I know we're getting a little nerdy and technical here, but it's this kind of almost like sour apple type taste that can kind of almost add this feeling of heat, like alcohol heat does to your throat. I think that's what
exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So it's just a little bit of a different expression. It's just another compound that's going on in the wine. Again, don't sweat the nerdy chemistry stuff, but that's something that is common. A good example of that, where you'd really get high levels of that, would be in sherry. So I don't know if anyone drinks sherry anymore. I almost brought sherry today because I love it so much, and I think it, along with champagne or sparkling wine, is one of the most versatile wine styles on the planet, because there's stuff from super vibrant and fresh to uber nutty and complex and savory, like the whole gamut. And then also dry to sweet. Most of it's dry, but there is sweet stuff too. So this is it's kind of like a cross between sherry, honestly, and champagne, this wine.
Really good.
Yeah. So this is 2008. So it's not only, it probably spent roughly... for these wines, this is Reserva, usually around 7 years in barrel, roughly. It depends on the vintage, and then in bottle for an additional time. So you are getting these richer, more what we describe as oxidative aromas and flavors, right? So again, similar to what we described in the champagne, but kind of turned up to 11 here, right? Nice. This is extra baked citrus and tree fruits, extra nutty. There is extra savory elements, right? If we want to describe it as schmaltzy chicken skin, or we could, for me, this is actually more.
There's something about this that reminds me of whiskey. I don't know what.
Of what?
Of whiskey. Yeah. Well, it's probably the time in barrel, even though it's not new barrel, because most whiskey is in new barrel, so you get a lot of those.
But it's like a little bit barrely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Wow.
And you have to think of every barrel as its own piece of quote unquote terroir as well.
Totally.
Because every barrel behaves differently. Every barrel has different microorganisms in it. This is blended, right? It's not just one barrel bottled, right? They'll blend a bunch of barrels. But like if you take sherry, there are certain producers that will bottle just single barrels because they have such a unique character to them. But what we're getting here collectively is the unique character of a bunch of barrels and the wine in barrel for a long time. So yeah, it's really cool stuff.
So nutty.
So chefs, what would you pair this with if you're cooking some meat?
Dude, I'm still thinking in the same way we were talking earlier with the champagne. Right? There's so many different options. It's so minerally. And also
It's
got
definitely
some
richer, right? It's not quite as like cleanse the
crisp.
palate.
Yeah.
It has like some sort of richness.
There's some
It's
richness.
got some
Right.
butteriness,
Yeah.
some creaminess to it.
Because you don't have the CO2 anymore, so that's adding to the richness and taking away from the freshening factor of it. It's also way more autolytic, a little bit of acetaldehydes I mentioned before. So it's just again turned up
Maybe
to
more-
11. So
maybe
you'd
more
want.
like a pork wine than
You like a rich pork wine?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that would be awesome with like a huge fat cap that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Jello. You know, like every
Ah.
bite you get that nice fat bit that just melts in your mouth.
Like a
and
pork
this,
New York here.
Yep.
Too.
Yeah.
Definitely like a pork New York.
Yeah.
Or
That'd
that
be cool.
big fatty tomahawk pork chop.
Yeah.
Or
Man.
Mr. Tangi's
Yeah.
favorite, some pork belly.
Yep, pork
You
belly.
like the pork belly? Oh yeah,
Oh,
that'd
yeah.
be good. That'd be good with this, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, something though that wouldn't be. So there's some philosophy that goes to flavors of wine and flavors of food, right? So a good rule of thumb, and it's not an absolute by any stretch, is if you have a very complex flavored wine like we have here, right? You would generally want to try to keep the food a bit less. A little more straightforward and simple, right? Meaning you wouldn't want to take that pork belly and marinate it in soy and ginger
Crusted
and
and all kinds
Okay.
of different spices.
exactly. You'd want to kind of keep it a little more straightforward. Now, again, this is where the nuance comes in. So if you're picking things in that marinade that would work well with this wine, then go for it. But if you want to do something that is like, again, use soy, ginger, blah, whatever, it wouldn't really work as well with this because you have
Yeah.
a very complex pork bite and then a very complex wine. It's harder
Thinking
to.
of that.
You can do it, but it's just a lot harder to get them to jive together because there's so many flavors going on. So, as a general rule of thumb, keep one complicated, one simple.
Yeah.
In terms
I've
of
said
food and wine.
before, it's like definitely how you learn to do these pairings as you progress as a cook or a chef. It's like you taste the wine and you either try to marry it directly or you
Yeah.
alter it exactly to where the balance.
Yep.
It's all about balance for sure.
Yeah.
But to get that marriage where it's both right in the middle, like you're talking about, it's a tough thing to do.
It is. It's really tough, but that shouldn't deter you from trying, right? And at home doing these things. But if you start with that basic principle of simple and complex, like one being simple, one being complex, whether it's the food or the wine, taking each role, that will help you get there sooner. And then you can start to dial it in by adding things slowly but surely. But that to me is a really actually great mark of a amazing restaurant and restaurant staff is that the wine and the beverage people work with the cooks, right? To really work together to try things, not just think they're going to work out of pure theory, because there is so much nuance. They really have to work together, and the chefs have to be willing to create a dish, and the beverage folks have to be willing to open a bottle, and they have to all try it together and give feedback together and find maybe compromise or maybe find a solution to making that work better, right?
Yeah.
That's when restaurants really kill it with food and wine pairing, because again, there's no hard and fast rules and absolute rules when it comes to this stuff. It all is very, very nuanced. So in some ways that's intimidating, but it really shouldn't intimidate you, because at the end of the day, it's just about eating good food and drinking good wine.